Masechet Baba Mesia Daf Chaf He Enu Mishnah Ve'elu Chayav Lehachriz. This is a follow-up to the first Mishnah, the opening one in this second Perek, listed all kinds of items that if you find them, you can keep them because there is no siman, no distinguishing mark. Now we're going to list all parallel things that are similar to the ones in the first Mishnah, except that in these cases there is a siman, and therefore whoever finds it has to announce that they found this type of item and give an opportunity for someone else to come and say, oh, that's mine, here is the siman, and thereby they can claim it. Masa perot bechli o kli kemot shehu, maot bechis o kis kemot shehu. If someone finds produce in a vessel, or the vessel by itself, or if he finds money in a pouch, or the pouch by itself, the vessel and the pouch are identifiable, and therefore if they're empty, you give it back to the guy, and if they have something in it, then it's likely that whatever is in it also belongs to that person, and you give it back. Sibure ferot, sibure ma'ot, shelosha matbeot ze al gav ze. If you have a pile of produce or a pile of coins or 3 coins stacked on top of each other, this is as opposed to scattered coins and scattered produce. That sounds like it just fell out of someone's basket and that's it. They forgot about it, and there's no way they can identify it. But here, it's a nice pile, and therefore the person can say, yeah, I put it there on purpose, and this is what it looked like. I had a pile that looked like this. There's 3 things on top of each other. Kerichot b'reshut ha-yachid. If you have bundles of grain that are in a secluded area, in a private area, the person can say, yeah, that's mine. I can say where it was. Ki karot bal habayit. Home-baked loaves of bread. If they're home-baked, they look different. Everybody has different shape and style that they make their bread, unlike a baker's bread that are always in the same mold. Wool fleece that's taken from a craftsman who processed it, and it looks unique. Everybody processes it in a different way. Jugs of wine, jugs of oil. In all these cases, if you find them, you have to announce to return them. Gemara, Tama de masa perot bichli umaot bekis. Hakeli ulfanav perot, kis ulfanav maot, hare elu shelo. We can infer from the Mishnah that you only have to return produce if it's found in a vessel, or money if it's in a pouch. But let's say you find a vessel and you have fruit nearby, or you find a pouch and there are coins nearby. Well, the vessel and the pouch, those are identifiable. You'll have to announce to return them. But the produce and the coins that are just happen to be nearby, well, you don't know if they came from that pouch or not. Maybe they were just on the floor. And therefore, we can infer from the Mishnah that you're allowed to keep them. You treat the vessel and the produce separately. Vessel you return, produce you keep. Tanena leha de tanura banan. And this inference that we got from the Mishnah is actually taught explicitly in a baraita. Masakili ufanav perot, kis ufanav maot hare elu shelo. Miksatan bakli umiksatan al gabe karka. Miksatan bakis umiksatan al gabe karka. Chayav lachriz. If one finds a vessel and in front of it there is fruit, or you found a pouch and in front of it there are coins, so you're allowed to keep the produce and the coins. You have to return the vessel and the pouch, but you can keep the rest. If, however, some of the coins, some of the produce was in the vessel and some was out of it, or some of the coins were in the pouch and some were out of it, then you assume that it fell down and some rolled out. The fact that some is still in it means that the ones that came out also came from originally within the pouch and within the vessel. And therefore, in that case, you have to announce and return everything. We treat them all as one because it's half in, half out. Good, that makes a lot of sense. Here's the problem: we have a contradiction from a second baraita. Urminhu masa davar she'en bo siman, besa davar sheyesh bo siman, chayav lahachriz. Ba ba'al siman v'natal et shelo, zacha hala b'davar she'en bo siman. According, this doesn't say exactly what's found, produce or coins or whatever. Sounds like any item. If you find something that does not have a siman right next to something that has a siman, then you have to assume that they came from the same place and treat them together, and you have to announce both of them. If the person comes and gives a sign for the item that has a sign, then he not only takes that item, but it also requires the other item that has no siman. You treat them all together. Therefore, according to this braita, if you find produce next to a vessel, a basket, then if you can identify the basket, even if nothing is in the basket, then you have to return the basket and the fruit as well. How do we solve this contradiction? We're going to see 4 answers. Amar Rav Zavid, la kashya ha bechuba bechitana ha besanna ufere. There's no problem. The second braita that was the stringent, says that's talking about a container of flax. Flax fibers are intertwined, and if some of it falls out, it's going to pull out all of it. And therefore, when we see flax next to a basket on the floor, we can assume that it started falling out, and then the rest all fell out, and therefore we treat them together. Whereas the Mishnah in the first braita is talking about a basket and produce. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are each separate, and so if a few fall out, the others stay in. So in that case, it makes sense that if some are in and some are out, then you return it. But if all of them are out, well then what are the chances that it fell in such a way that everything fell out? If you can see like the shape of these typical jars, right, they have a fat part and a skinny part. So even if it falls, like some of the things would fall out, they're separate things or whatever they are, apples, right? Some would fall out, and you'd expect at least some would stay in. Even if it's a basket, some should stay in, the ones that were on the bottom. And the fact that they're all out shows that these are separate things. Happen to be that someone dropped a basket near a place where someone else dropped fruit. Okay, so that's how we can resolve it. We're talking about 2 different cases. Second resolution, the Papa Amar, actually, we could say everything's talking about produce, not flax. That's all stuck to each other. Vela kashya. Ha de ishtayar ba midi, ha de la ishtayar ba midi. And the difference is that the baraita is talking about a case where some remained in the basket. It doesn't say, it just says nearby, that you find something nearby. But maybe it means also that there's some inside. So if there's some produce inside, that's what the second baraita was talking about. You assume that all the produce that was outside also originally was inside. And so you return everything. Whereas the Mishnah and first Baraita is talking about a case where the basket is empty. And if it's empty, then there's no reason to assume that the things that are outside came from inside the basket, and you treat them separately, and you can keep the produce. Third answer, maybe both cases where the basket is empty. Whereas the Baraita, the second Baraita, is talking about a case where the mouth of the basket is facing the produce. If it's facing the produce, then it's likely that it fell and all the produce came out. So therefore you have to treat them together and return everything. Whereas the Mishnah and the first Baraita is where the basket or the vessel, its opening is facing the opposite direction from where the fruit is. Therefore, it's very unlikely that the fruit came from it, and that's why you can treat them separately, return the basket, but keep the fruit. And the last answer, or it could be that in both cases, the basket is empty and the mouth of the basket is facing the fruit. But the Mishnah is talking about a case where the basket has a rim, and therefore if these apples fell from this basket, and the basket or vessel that has a rim, the rim should have stopped some of them from coming out, right? Like here, this rim. So some of them should have stayed inside. And the fact that they're all out suggests that they did not come from within this vessel. Therefore, you can keep the produce. Whereas the second Braita is talking about a case where there's no rim. If there's no rim, then once it falls, then everything is likely to fall out. And the fact that it's empty is not a sign that it didn't come from inside. Therefore, we can assume that since it's nearby and it's even facing, the opening is facing the produce, that all the produce came from there, and you have to return everything. Okay, these are all different answers, but it's good we have different answers because each one will apply in different cases. So whenever a case happens, you have to bring your detectives and try to figure out what might have happened. And if it's likely that the second item is connected with the first, then return everything. If it's likely that the thing without a siman is not connected with the first, then you can keep it. Sibure perot v'sibure ma'ot. Mishnah mentioned that if there's piles of produce and piles of coins, then you have to return them. Shmat mina minyan have siman. Can we learn from this that the number is a distinguishing mark? You see, it has plural, sibure, piles, right? So we ask, how many piles? The person says, oh, there were 4 piles. Okay, that's a good distinguishing mark. So can we learn from that a number is a siman? And we answer, not necessarily. Taneh sibur perot. We're not clear on the exact language of the Mishnah. Is it sibure perot in plural or sibur perot in singular? It could be that the right proper reading is a pile of produce. Shmat mina makom have siman. Okay, so maybe it's the place that is the siman, is the distinguishing mark, right? There's a pile, and I can identify the place. So can I learn from the fact that it's in singular that a place is a good distinguishing mark? Not necessarily. Taneh sibure perot. No, it could be that the plural version is in fact the correct reading, and therefore the mark is the number and not the place. And therefore, since we're not sure if it's singular or plural, so we cannot prove from this Mishnah either opinion. Shelosha matbeot ze al gav ze. If you have 3 coins stacked on top of each other. So this is not just a pile where you'd have to identify it with a place or number, but this is a very nice, neat stack, not just a pile. So in this case, you have to return it. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak migdala'a. This is a funny, interesting coincidence that Rabbi Yitzchak, whose name means Migdal, probably comes from Migdal, but he happened to teach a halacha about towers, which Migdal means a tower. So he says when the Mishnah says 3 coins, one on top of each other, has to be arranged in a tower. In other words, either that you have the biggest ones on the bottom and then smaller and smaller, or if they're the same size, has to be all nice and evenly stacked, not in a haphazard way. Tanyana mehachi masap maot mefuzarot hare elu shelo asim kemigdalim chayav lachriz ve'elu hen asim kemigdalim shelosha matbein ze al gav ze. A braita that supports Rabbi Yitzchak Migdala'a's statement that says if you find coins that are scattered, you can keep them. If they're like a tower, then you have to announce them. And what does it mean, like a tower? That you have 3 stacked, one on top of each other, so it has to be stacked nice and neatly. Ha gufa kashya. This braita seems self-contradictory. Amat masama ot mefuzarot hare elu shelo. Ha mishalchefe shalchufe chayav lachriz. On the one hand, the beginning of the braita says that if you find scattered coins, you can keep them. We can infer from that if they're partially overlapping, then you have to return them. Emasefa asuyin kimigdalin chayav lachriz hamishalchefe shalchufe hare elu shelo. But the continuation of the braita says if they are stacked up nicely like a tower, then you have to announce to return them. That we can infer from that if they're not stacked up like a tower, but they're just partially overlapping, then you can keep them. That's the question. Tana kol she'en asuin kimigdalin mefuzarot kare lehu. It must be that the author of this baraita thinks that if they're not stacked up nicely, he calls that scattered. Scattered doesn't only mean that they're far away from each other, not touching each other. Even if they're overlapping, that's also called scattered. And so that's why anything that's scattered and anything that's not a tower is called scattered, and you can keep. Amar Rabbi Hanina, lo shanu ela shel shelosha melachim, aval shemelech echad eno chayav lehachriz. Rabbi Hanina qualifies the Mishnah and says, when the Mishnah says that if there's 3 coins on top of each other, then you have to return it, that's only if the coins are minted by 3 different kings, 3 different types of coins. But if they're all the same, minted by the same king, then you don't have to announce them. Now, what does that mean? Hechidame. Ida asvin kemigdalin afilu shemelech echad name. Ibeida en asvin kemigdalin afilu shel shlosha melachim nami lo. If they are made like a tower, then even if they're all the same coin, then it should be that you have to leave it. And if they are not made like a tower, then even if they're minted by 3 different kings, you don't have to return it. You can keep it, right? Isn't the main factor if they're made a tower or they're scattered. So what does it matter if they are minted by the same king or three different kings? Ela itamad hachi itamad lo shanu ela shel melech echad ke'ayin shelosha melachim aval shel melech echad eno chayav lachriz. Rather, we're going to rephrase Rabbi Chanina's statement, and here's what he said. We only said that you have to return it if it's one king, but they're formed in a style as just like it was three kings. But if it's really only one king, then you don't have to announce them. What does that mean? When we say it has to be like three different minted by three kings, either actually minted by three kings, or the point is that they have to be different sizes, and you have the biggest one on the bottom, the medium one in the middle, and then the smallest one on top. Then surely these were placed here on purpose. Whoever put them very purposefully and is expecting them to stay there and is going to come back for them. Aval shel melech echad dechulahu ki hadade ninhu afagav de manche adahadi. But if they're all minted from the same king, meaning they're all the same exact coin, same size, then even if they happen to have fallen upon each other and made a pile or a stack, nevertheless you can keep them, because it could happen that they would fall just in that way, and it's not as purposeful as if it's a tower that's large on the bottom and small on top. ורבי יוחנן אמר, אפילו של מלך אחד נמה מכריז. מה מכריז? מניין. מה ידיעה? תלתה. אפילו תראה נמה, אמר רבינה, טבעה ומכריז. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with Rabbi Chanina's interpretation. He says, even if all three coins are minted by the same king and they all look the same size, and they're stacked upon each other, even then you have to return them. He thinks it's very unlikely that three coins are just going to fall on top of each other at all. So even if they're the same size, then it means that they were carefully placed there and they have to be returned. Now, the Gemara asks, when you return them and announce that, what are you looking for? Right? You'll announce, I found coins, and the person has to give you the number of coins. Yeah, if he says, I lost 3 coins, or I placed 3 coins here, then you give it back to him. Now we ask, how come in the Mishnah it says specifically 3? Why not even 2? And Ravina explains, because he's announcing coins, and maybe he'll say something about the coins, their type of coin. But if since he's saying coins in plural, so then we know it's at least 2. So just guessing 2 is not going to be sufficient of a siman. Therefore, it has to be 3 or more. Kesher mahu, keshura mahu, kahasuba mahu, kesula mahu. So far we only talked about being stacked on top of each other, that's purposeful and you have to return them. But what if it's in a bracelet format, right? You find the coins on the floor all around in a circle, or keshura in the straight line, or in a triangle shape. Or like a ladder, meaning they are overlapping each other in this way? Or do you consider all those to be purposeful placements? And the person says, I'm going to place them here. That'll be an indication that I put them here on purpose. And that way I'll be able to identify it and collect it later. So if you find that, can you assume that this is just random and keep it? Or it's purposeful and you have to return it? Pishot meha chada. We don't know the answers to all of them, but we can answer one of them. Damar Rav Nachman amar Rabba bar Avu kol she'ilu machnis lekisam benehem v'notam b'bat achat chayav lachriz. Rav Nachman said that as long as you put a wood chip between them and lift them all at once, then you have to return them. And that would apply to this, where you could take one wood chip and collect them all on the same in one go. And so since they're all connected to each other, they're all touching each other, so that's considered together. That's a siman that they were placed there on purpose and not just dropped. Rav Ashe, kavne bet kulis mahu. What if they're like the stones that are made for the Roman god Mercury? In that case they would make it like a step. They put 2 on the floor and then 1 on top of each other. or one on top of both of them, like a triangle, but vertically. What about that? Tashema de Tanya, Masa ma'ot mefuzarot hare elu shelo, k'abnei bet kolis chayav lachriz, ve'elu hen abnei bet kolis, achat mikan, v'achat al gabehen. And the answer we find in the Braita, if one finds scattered coins, you can keep them. But if they are in a form that is done in the pagan temple to Mercury, then you have to return them. And what is that? That means we'll put one here and one over there, and you put another one on top of it. Tenor Banan, Hamose Sela Bashuk, Mesocha Vedov Amar Shelihi, Hadashahi, Neroniti, Shamel Pelonihi, Lo Amar Kelum. Another Braita, if someone finds a coin in the marketplace, and his friend comes and says, oh, that coin that you found, that's mine, and I can identify it because, it's a new coin, right? Or it's a Nero coin. The Emperor Nero made coins that were lightweight, different from most other coins. Or he can identify which king minted it, whose face is on the coin. That is not sufficient to return it to him. And not only are these not sufficient signs, velo od ela afilu shemo katub aleha lo amar kelum lefi she'en siman lamatbeya. Right, so not only these that are kind of general, not very specific, even if the person, that friend, his name is Joe, he has his name written, he wrote his name on the coin itself, right? Joe's coin. Still, you don't return it to him. Why? Because there's no siman for a coin. Because even if it did belong to him, coins are made to spend. So it could be that he spent it, gave it to someone else, and it fell from that other person. You don't go and erase the name of the person before. And so since coins go around and they're spent, so a sign on the coin itself is not a sign. The only way to return a coin is if it's in a pouch, or if it's in a formation that shows that the person left it there on purpose and I can identify it. Next Mishnah, Masar achar hagapa o achar hagader gozalot mekusharim o bashevilin shebasadot. Hare ze lo yiga bahen. Masar kli bashpa im mechuse lo yiga bo im megule notel umachriz. If someone found fledglings that are tied, their wings are tied, so they can't go and they can't fly anywhere, but they can hop around, and you find them behind a wooden fence, behind a stone fence, or you find them in these paths that go through a field. Don't touch them, because that means that belong to somebody, and somebody has to put them there for safekeeping while they go do something, and they're going to come back for them. So you don't even, and this is an interesting case. This is where you not only, you can't keep it, take it for yourself. You also don't take it and announce, because what are you going to announce? They look the same as any other birds. Lots of birds are tied like that. And so then, and the place, you also can't identify the place, identify it by place, because they hop around. So they are moving around. Therefore, don't announce it, because then the person who it belongs to won't be able to identify it. Rather, just leave it there. If they're there behind the fence in that protected area, it means that the owner put it there on purpose for safekeeping and will come back for it. So leave it there, so we'll come back for it. Similarly, if you find a vessel in a garbage heap, if it's covered, then don't touch it. That means someone put it there on purpose and is hiding it there and is going to come back for it later. But if it's exposed, then that means it's a lost item and you have to take it and announce, hey, anybody lose something in the garbage heap, and see if someone can come and identify it. Now we ask, Mai ta'ama, tamrinan hane inashe atzna inhu v'ishakel lehu, let lehu lemarayu simana begavaihu, hilkach leshab kinhu adate maraihu v'shakil lehu. How come you leave the fledglings there and you don't collect them and announce to try to return it? Because we assume that the owners of these fledglings hid them there. And if you take them, the owner will not have a siman and will not be able to reclaim them. Therefore, just leave them there until the owner comes for them. Wait a second, why isn't the knot that they use to tie its wings, how come that's not a siman? Now we're talking about when they're tied with their wings in a standard way. Everybody uses the same type of knot, and so therefore that's not a siman. Why isn't the place a siman? You say, well, I put them, I found the fledglings, and someone can identify precisely where they are. then he can collect them. Amar Rav Ukba bar Chama b'medadin. We're talking about they can hop. They're not totally tied up, and they can hop around and move. So there's no specific place. Even medadin ma'al ma'atu mutarin. Wait, if they can hop, then maybe they came from elsewhere, and they happen to hop into this field and behind this fence. And so maybe therefore they come from elsewhere, and you should be allowed to just keep them. So you're right. We have a safek. It could be that they came from elsewhere and they're lost items, or it could be that the person put them here specifically and is going to come back here. So whenever we have a case of an uncertain placement, Rav says, if you're not certain if it was placed here on purpose or not, then just leave it there, right? And assume that the person will come back for it, especially if it has no siman, so then they won't be able to reclaim it. But b'di'avad, if you took it already, then you don't have to return it, because it's just as likely that this came from elsewhere. It's just a lost item without a siman that you're allowed to keep. The Mishnah said that if you find an item in the garbage dump, if it's covered over, then leave it there. Probably the person put it there on purpose and is going to come back for it later. It's not a lost item, so just leave it. Whereas if it's exposed, then sounds like it's lost, right? And I don't know, they dropped it and then it got thrown in the garbage, and so he's still looking for it. He wants it back and it has a siman. So then announce it and see if someone can come identify it. We ask, Urminhu, Masa keli tamun ba'ashpa, notel machriz, sheken derech ashpa lefanot. There's a contradiction from a baraita that says if you find a vessel that's hidden in a garbage heap, take it and announce it, because it's routine for garbage dumps to be cleared. And if you're just going to leave it there, then it's going to be cleared out, and then no one will ever be able to find it again. So here we have a contradiction between the Mishnah that says if it's covered, leave it there, and this Braita that says if it's covered, then take it and announce to look for the owner. Amar Rav Zavid will have a couple of answers. La kashya ha bekube vechase ha besakine vehamnik. Rav Zavid says there's no problem. The Braita is talking about knives and forks, where those are things that often just get thrown out by mistake. If anybody has silverware, the little the teaspoons, they always get thrown out by mistake. People leave them in a yogurt or in the mug, all right, and they just get thrown out. So this happens, that small items get thrown out by mistake, and therefore that's the case where you should take it and return it. Whereas if it's a big item, a container or a cup, then it's not likely that it was thrown out by mistake. It's more likely that it was placed there on purpose for safekeeping, and the person will come back for it's not a lost item, and therefore leave it there. Now, if it's a container or a cup, then don't touch it. That's what the Mishnah said. And if it's knives and forks that are likely to fall there and are lost items, then you should take it and make an announcement so that the person can get it back. That's one answer. Rav Papa Amar, ha v'ha bechube v'chaseh v'la kashya kan b'ashpa asuya lefanot kan b'ashpa she'ena asuya lefanot. No, both sources are talking about knives and forks, and there's still no problem. The Braita is talking about a garbage dump that is regularly cleared out, and therefore you don't want to leave it there just in case someone put it there, someone lost it, and once it's cleared out, they'll never get it back. So therefore, take it and announce. Whereas the Mishnah is talking about a garbage dump that is generally stays there, right? That's the place that they just leave it there all the time. And since it's not cleared out, and it could be that the owner put it there on purpose, so he's going to want to come back for it. So then, therefore, leave it there and do not touch it. We ask, wait a second, if it's a case of what you said about the Braita, that it's a garbage dump that's likely to be cleared, then that's a deliberate loss. In other words, that's something that's totally lost because it's going to be cleared out, and therefore finders keepers. Rather, it must be that it's a garbage dump that isn't usually cleared out, but the owner of the land decided one day, you know what? I want to clear it out. That's it. It's getting too much, and he clears it out. So it's not usually cleared out. So therefore, it's not a definite loss that if a person put it there on purpose, then he would expect that it would stay. But now it's about to be cleared out. So then you should take it and announce it so that that person can get it back. It makes sense according to the Papa. That's why the Baraita says that it's the normal way of garbage dumps to be cleared out, right? Because the Papa says that we're talking about a garbage dump. The Baraita is talking about a garbage dump that is going to be cleared out. That's what he says here. So that's why he says in the Baraita, right over here, right? Sheken derech hashpa lefanot. However, according to Rav Zavid, why does it say that it's normal for the garbage dump to be cleared out if Rav Zavid thinks that it's talking about a garbage dump that is not regularly cleared out? And the answer is he can interpret those words as follows: Sheken derech hashpa lefanot la kelim ketanim. It doesn't mean that that garbage dump is cleared out, but rather small utensils are often cleared out into a garbage dump. As we said before, right? Those teaspoons, you always lose them because they get cleared out in there. Therefore, if you find forks and spoons, knives and forks that are small, then it's likely that they were lost, and that's why you should take them and announce so that the rightful owner can get them back. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.